A certified hood classic.
Hi guys, welcome and welcome back to my channel. My name is Quesadiyah, aka Quesadiyah. It's been a minute, I know, I say this in every video. I'm gonna try to be better and more consistent in 2021, but today's video is gonna be a career update, just giving a little bit more information on how work as an urban planner and community development professional, how it's been going, some lessons I've learned over the course of 2020. This year has been crazy in a lot of ways, but a lot of lessons learned, and I'm gonna share them with you all today. So hopefully this will be helpful for anyone who's interested in learning a little bit more about what life can potentially look like in a career in urban planning or community development related fields. And I'm also going to provide some new book recommendations, a podcast recommendation, and a movie recommendation, because when I'm filming this, it's the week before New Year's Eve, so I actually have this whole week off. I'm gonna take a much deserved break, and I know a lot of people are currently off of school and off of work, so hopefully if you have some time you can check out these books, check out the podcast, check out the movie, and hopefully enjoy. So without further ado, I'm gonna get right into it. So if you have not seen my urban planning Q&A video that I filmed back in April, I would suggest going to check that out. In that video, it was 8 months ago, but it feels like years ago, honestly, because so many things have changed in regard to my work since then. For those of you who don't know, I work as a corridor manager. I feel like corridor management is a role that is not talked about very frequently. I honestly didn't know what corridor management was until I accepted the role. Basically, what I do is I work in a specific neighborhood in Philly. I work with small businesses, residents, and other stakeholders to help the neighborhood become more economically viable. So I connect small business owners with grants, with loans. I'm also working on some streetscape projects, public improvement projects, placemaking projects, and just different like community building activities. So in a normal year without COVID, I would be a lot more involved directly in the community, like going out, going door to door. My window just flew open. Hopefully that doesn't happen again. Yeah, so in a normal year without COVID, I would be spending a lot more time actually in the field, working every day. I would say the closest thing to corridor management, I know someone commented on my last video and they said like economic development planning. In a way, it's almost like being a public servant. Like I don't work directly for the city, but my job is funded through the city. So I'm like under contract to do specific things through the Department of Commerce. So yeah, it's like working for city council almost, working in urban planning, working in economic development. So basically it's like a lot of different aspects of what I went to school for in one career. So like when I initially got the job, I was super excited because I felt like, oh wow, finally like I can put everything I've learned into practice. I can help, you know, work in a neighborhood. Really, window again? Yeah, so I felt like it would be a chance for me to apply those skills that I learned and build new skills and build relationships. Everything was cool for like the first month and a half, then COVID hit. So once COVID hit, a lot of the small businesses shut down. A lot of small businesses couldn't make their rent payments, and it was really unclear if they were going to be able to stick around on the corridor. And you know, for those of you who are familiar with urban planning, at least in my program, we talked a lot about local neighborhood corridors and the importance of small businesses. It's especially important now to consider how amongst the changing landscape with like more people, you know, purchasing things through e-commerce, it's like, how do these small businesses stay relevant? How are they able to continue to make an income, to make profit, when people are typically going to like the big box retailers or buying off Amazon? So that was already something that I was thinking about before COVID even hit. And then it's like when COVID hit, it kind of just obliterated the small business landscape on the corridor that I work on. I've been like operating in crisis mode basically since COVID started. So there was COVID-19, business closures from like mid-March to I think the beginning of June, and then in June the businesses started to reopen. And then around that time, like end of May, early June, was when George Floyd was murdered in Minneapolis. As many of you probably know, George Floyd's death spurred a lot of protests and civil unrest in cities all over the country, and this happened in Philly. Actually, it happened on the corridor that I work on, and it was crazy because I was sitting at home watching CNN, and they put up footage live footage of my corridor, the corridor that I work on national news. So I could see in real time the stores, the businesses, the owners I knew, their stores being impacted by the civil unrest. So there was a lot of physical damage. A lot of business owners lost like significant amounts of inventory, like thousands of dollars worth of inventory. There was graffiti, there was broken windows, there was just a lot, you know, going on. So we were already in a bad situation pre the civil unrest because of COVID. And then once the civil unrest happened, it was like a double whammy. At my job, we had kind of rushed into like evaluate situation. I was quickly brought back to work. Up until that point, I had been working from home. I had to be like right back in the office, right on the ground, talking to people, trying to figure out exactly what they needed in order to get their business back to a secure state. So a lot of businesses needed funding, they needed loans, some of them didn't have insurance, so they had to repair all the damages out of pocket. We actually raised a lot of money at my job.
But she and others also saw opportunity.
We had hundreds of people show up from this neighborhood, from all parts of Philadelphia, and they were just like, you know, what can I do to help?
She says in 1 week, the group received 8 months worth of donations, money that was used to repair and now will be used to revitalize as more continue to pour in.
And we were able to quickly get this money out to businesses, which was amazing. I think it was, you know, really helpful and something that I'm super proud of. But of course, the work didn't end there. You know, it's like they need money. The money that we're able to provide wasn't necessarily enough, so they had to figure out other sources in order to rebuild their business. They needed inventory, and a lot of the business owners had just lost morale at this point. It's like, well, they have been operating in the community for years, and something like this could happen and just affect them tremendously. So it was just a really unfortunate situation. So that was tough, and I basically was working 12-hour days all summer just to get things back to some sort of normalcy. But this whole year has really, I don't know if any part of this year has been really normal. But I think the one benefit to this like series of unfortunate events was that a lot more people were now invested in what happened on this particular corridor. So like before the civil unrest, people were just like, oh, you know, this neighborhood, like it was significant back in the day, but it's, you know, it's the hood now, nobody really cares. And then after the civil unrest, a lot of people were just really concerned about what happens in this specific community. They wanted to offer support, wanted to offer, you know, financial donations. We had offers for people to come and clean up. We had like big corporations reaching out and asking like how they could benefit the small businesses. A lot of good things happened as a result of these negative events. So I felt kind of hopeful after that first instance of civil unrest. I was like, okay, we can rebuild, we can come back better and stronger. And then in October, end of October, it happened again. So there was another instance of police brutality, and this one was a lot closer to home. Walter Wallace was killed by Philadelphia PD. So, and this was only about 10 blocks away from where I work. So I knew once that happened, I'm like, okay, you know, there's gonna be more protesting, there's gonna be more civil unrest. So then it happened again, and a lot of the businesses that had been impacted in the first instance of civil unrest were hit again. So it was like we had finally gotten to a place where things were stable. They were quickly made unstable again. I've been so emotionally invested in my work that like I was just feeling so upset, just like, you know what, like I tried so hard to help get things back to normal, and now, you know, we're back to like ground zero again. Business owners were kind of looking at me like, oh, Sadia, like what can you help us? Can you do this? Can you do that? And I'm just like, you know what, I'm just one person. Like, please don't put all of your hopes and expectations in me, because like I have limited resources. There's like only so much I can give. So then I was just feeling completely drained, completely depleted. I just wanted to share this story, and I'm gonna insert pictures and like video if I haven't already, but just to, you know, show the, I guess, the other side to my work. I think in the beginning I was really excited about being able to help people and like do good work, but I think on the flip side, I was so emotionally invested in my work that, you know, when things weren't going well, I started to feel like upset and like physically sick and stressed out. So one of the tips that I want to share with you guys is to definitely set boundaries around your work. Obviously, you need to have other sources of fulfillment in your life besides your career. I think I was just investing so much of my energy in my work that when things weren't going well, I was just like, oh, like I was so upset. And I think another thing that happened is because I was operating in crisis mode so often that I wasn't able to set my own agenda and set my own priorities. It was like, oh, you know, Sadia, this person needs help. Their store was just looted. Oh, they were just robbed. Can you come here? Can you do this? Can you do this? And I was just like, just like responding to everything like as fast as I can without really taking the time to like sit back, set my own priorities, set my own agenda. Because I was so focused on like what was happening in the present, it kind of made me lose sight of all the progress that we had made over time. And I just felt even more hopeless. Like, oh man, why am I even doing this work? Why am I investing my time and energy if it's just gonna fall apart again and again and again? Yeah, I would say make sure like don't lose sight of the big picture within the process. And this goes for, I think, any field of work. Even if you're not working in like planning or community development, I would just say it's just good practice in general to set your own agenda, set your own priorities, keep the big picture in mind. Despite all the challenges, I think it's definitely been helpful in terms of helping me to know how to problem solve, trusting myself to make the right decision, and also knowing how to operate within a crisis situation. So I would say to anyone who is in a similar scenario because of their work, or just feeling stressed out because of the nature of your work, or feeling like pulled in a bunch of different directions, not able to set your own priorities, definitely set boundaries, also delegate where you can, and just try to cultivate a life outside of your work. That's super, super important. Have other things that you're invested in that you care about. Like, so for me, I had my 9-to-5 job. I actually started working part-time as a running coach with a group of young people, and for me that was like a really good outlet. And then obviously like other things, like for me it's like maintaining my faith and just other like hobbies and interests. So definitely make sure you are trying to be as well-rounded as possible in order to prevent burnout. For 2021, I hope that things will be a little bit more normal. I'm hopeful that I'll be able to spend more time on like placemaking projects. We were able to do a few this year. We commissioned some murals for the corridor, and I definitely want to do more of that, like some more arts and culture types of projects, because those are the things that really get me excited about work. I just wanted to share this. I guess it's like a story time kind of thing, but just a more realistic depiction of what life as a community development professional can look like. Obviously, like, this situation is really specific to me and the type of work that I do in corridor management. But just in case like you're in a similar job or face similar challenges, I just wanted to share this story. So hopefully you can learn from my experiences, or just like get a glimpse into what a non-traditional career that's related to urban planning could look like. Okay, so now let's shift gears and talk a little bit about my recommendations in terms of books. I have a podcast recommendation and a movie recommendation. So for those of you that have a little bit more time over the holiday break, hopefully you will enjoy some of these recommendations. Or if you have any other resources that you would like to share with people who are interested in like urban studies and urban planning, feel free to leave them in the comments so we can all learn and share and grow together. I have 3 books here. This one is called There Goes the Hood, Views of Gentrification from the Ground Up. This is something I started reading in college, and now that I have a little bit more time over this next week, I definitely, I want to go back and revisit this. It kind of just documents the gentrification in Harlem and in Brooklyn. It was written in 2006, so it's kind of interesting to see how gentrification has increased since then. I feel like New York in 2020 looks very different than it did in 2006, although 2006 wasn't that long ago, but gentrification, it moves fast. I have this other book here. It's called Black in Place, Spatial Aesthetics of Race in a Post-Chocolate City. So this is kind of similar to the other book, and this is by Brandy Thompson Summers, and it just talks about 8th Street, which is a significant corridor in Washington, D.C., and the gentrification and displacement that has happened there over time. I picked this up because I didn't really get the chance to study DC in depth in college or in grad school, but I feel like it's a really interesting city, and it's changed a lot over the last couple of years. So I want to just read more about it, learn more about what's happened, and see if there's any insight I can take from this book as it pertains to my work on a corridor in Philly. Last but not least, I have The Warmth of Other Suns by Isabel Wilkerson. This one is not as obviously related to urban planning, but I think this was like a really, really interesting book. I read this at the beginning of quarantine. It's basically a series of interviews with 3 Black Americans as they move through the Great Migration. All 3 of the people who were profiled in this book You know, they started out in the South, and for, you know, different reasons, looking for like economic stability, looking for just better like racial dynamics, moved from the South to the North over time. One of the guys ended up in Harlem, another ended up in LA, and the woman, she moved from Mississippi to Chicago. So it was just a really interesting account of the Great Migration and how it changed the landscape of America. It was interesting for me too because my great-grandparents in, I want to say the 30s, they moved from North Carolina to Philly. And my family has been in Philly ever since. The Great Migration has obviously had an impact on my life and where I've ended up. Really easy to read. It's kind of long, but like I got through it pretty quickly. So I would definitely recommend this for anyone who's interested just in learning more about that time in American history. In terms of podcasts, I recently started this podcast. It's called Louder Than a Riot. It's through NPR, but basically it talks about the link between hip hop and mass incarceration. Once again, not an obvious relation to urban planning. I just think it was interesting. I started a couple days ago. I'm on episode 3, but it just talks about, you know, hip hop and mass incarceration, how they got entangled in America, you know, how a lot of significant rappers and other people associated with hip hop are often like profiled by the police, often end up in jail, how the lyrics and songs have an influence on the behaviors that people choose to exhibit. The hosts bring up a lot of good points, and there's like features from different rappers, and like it talks about different parts of the United States and like regional hip hop movements and stuff like that. So to me, that's interesting. My final recommendation is a movie called The Last Black Man in San Francisco. The cinematography is amazing, but besides that, indirectly I think is related to urban planning because it talks about like gentrification in San Francisco. So like the main character in the movie is trying to buy a house that was built by his grandfather back in like the early 1900s in this really famous neighborhood in San Francisco, like where the Full House houses are. I forget what the area is called, but it's one of those like classic San Francisco houses, and of course like property values have increased, you know, exponentially. So it's about like his journey to reclaim that space and that neighborhood where like Black people have been displaced over time. Also just the way that it portrays Black masculinity and like friendships amongst Black males. Like it's just a really beautiful story. I loved it. So definitely check it out if you haven't seen it. Let me pull up the poster, and I think it's on Amazon Prime. That's where I watched it before. And it has the guy from Lovecraft Country. I forget his name. I think that's it for this video. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something that you can... I want all my videos to have like a takeaway. So I hope that this video helped you to learn something, or you just found it interesting. Like, comment, and subscribe for more content, and also let me know what other types of videos you would like to see in the comments. And like I said before, if you have any book recommendations, podcast recommendations, movie recommendations that relate to urban planning in some way, feel free to leave them in the comments. You can connect with me on Instagram if you have any questions, comments, concerns, and I will see you guys in my next video. Happy New Year!